Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com, and today we're going to be looking at a cool little trap, the Magnus Smith trap. And it derives from the Fischer variation in the Sicilian defense. And since so many of you play the Sicilian defense or see the Sicilian defense on a very frequent basis, I want to go ahead and take a look at this trap, since I've seen it a few times and you may come across it a few times if you do play the Fischer variation. So it starts out with pawn to e4, pawn to c5, Sicilian defense, knight to f3, development move, bringing the knight to the center, controlling the center squares. And black's going to play d6, very common, pawn to d4, developing the pawn to a central square. Black's going to take, we're going to recapture with our knight. Black's going to develop his knight to f6, central control, at the same time attacking our pawn on e4. We're going to develop, at the same time, attack the center and defend our pawn on e4. Black's going to reciprocate and bring his knight to c6, attacking the center, and we're going to bring our bishop to c4. And this is the Fischer variation. This is kind of where I want to get into. And as you can see here, as many of you know if you've watched my videos, the f7 square is a huge weakness for black, especially early on when white's light square bishop can eye on it very easily, and it's not protected by much besides the black king. And so this is a very common variation that you will see in the Sicilian defense from white's side. And so black has two options, and one is the better move, and that's to bring his pawn to e6. Nice little move here. It's a little defensive and passive, but at the same time it pretty much blocks this bishop, this light square bishop, from white, and there's not much that he can do. The f7 square is going to be really hard for him to attack now with his light square bishop. But a lot of times, a lot of players in this variation tend to think that they need to bring their pawn to g6, and I've seen it quite a few times, about half and half. And a lot of players think that they need to fianchetto their bishop to g7 so that they can get more attacking on the center control and try to have a counterattack on the dark squares, eyeing from the g7 square with their dark square bishop. But this is going to be a mistake, and from here white can capture this this knight on c6, and black, after he recaptures, then white has the nice little move of playing pawn to e5, and this is really what I want to look at right here after pawn to e5. If black looks at it very quickly, if he tries to retake with his pawn, then white has a nice little tactic. He can play bishop takes on f7, and this king is forced to take this bishop on f7. He can't bring his king to d7 because our queen's here. And after he takes our bishop on f7, then we can bring in with our queen and take his queen. His queen was only defended by this king on e8, and once this king moves, we can now take on d8. So he can't take with his pawn, even though he would like to. And at the same time, we're attacking this knight here on f6. So his knight really has two moves where he can go. He can always bring it back to g8, but you never want to develop a piece and then bring it right back. You're going to lose a lot of momentum as far as tempo gaining, and white's going to have a huge developmental advantage. So he would like to bring it to either g4 or h5, and a lot of times you'll see h5. If he brings it to g4, it's going to be very hard for him. White can play the move pawn to e6, blocking off his defender, the bishop from c8. If he tries to take and we recapture, once he now captures, we can take with our queen. As you can see, the black king is completely unguarded. It doesn't matter which side he castles on, it's going to be very hard for him to stay protected. At the same time, white has a very good defense. He has three pawns. He can castle on the king side or the queen side. So this is going to be very good for white. He's going to have a pretty easy win, in my opinion. So from here, a lot of times, instead of knight to g4, you'll see knight to h5. And from here, Bobby Fischer recommends, and since Bobby Fischer says it, it must be true, queen to f3. And this is a very important move because you're putting another attacker on this f7 square, which is, again, a very important weakness that black has. And from here, a lot of times black has two moves. He really needs to block off one of these attackers, and he can do this by one of two ways. He can bring his pawn to d5, or he can bring his pawn to e6. The easiest way is to block off this bishop that's also an attacker along with this queen on f3, eyeing down on the f7 square. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one. If he moves pawn to d5, then we can take with our knight. Again, we can sacrifice because we have such a huge attack against black. And from here, there's not much that black can do here. We can get our bishop involved if we have to, but once we take here, if he takes with his pawn, we can take with our bishop, and we have a queen defending it, and it's going to be really hard for black to defend all the attacks that we have. If instead, if he plays e6, now we can bring our pawn and start to attack his knight on h5. And again, there's really only one move he can play now. He can't bring it to f6 because we'll take it with our pawn. He's going to bring it back to g7. As you can already see, this is a very passive move. He really wants to bring his dark square bishop to g7 and get it active, attacking the dark squares along this long diagonal, attacking the center. But his dark square bishop is very passive now, and as many of you know, the dark square bishop for black is his most important bishop early on in the game, and right now he's not doing anything. So it's not always how many pieces you have, but how many active pieces you have in chess. So this is very important. If we can have a passive knight here on g7 blocking this dark square bishop, this is very good for us. And from here we can continue and bring our knight to e4, and this has a lot of problems for black. There's not much he can do here. Again, we're attacking this pawn on d6. We're also attacking this square on f6 that would check the king. He would be forced to move. He couldn't take with his queen because of our pawn here. And if his king gets out in the open, it's going to be a very easy game. We can just start to attack. We can castle on the queen side and add another rook attacker on the d file. It's going to be very hard for black not to lose right away. If black has a last ditch effort and tries to bring his queen down to a5, as you can see right now, he's attacking our king on e1 at the same time attacking our pawn. We can now just develop our bishop to d2, and if he does take, this will be another mistake, we can bring our bishop to c3, and his queen is trapped. His queen's going to be playing on the sidelines, and white's going to go on to a very easy game. So as you can see, it's really complicated for white to find any good play here. And I've tried to play it on black side, and I couldn't find a very easy way to come up with a draw, much less a win. So I really feel like white has a very easy game from here, especially depending on where black moves. A lot of times black makes an easy mistake early on and you can win very easily. But if he does play correct, a lot of times he is very passive in his defense, and a lot of times you can pick it apart one by one. So this is the Magnus Smith trap. You'll see a lot. If you haven't tried out the Fischer variation in the Sicilian defense, definitely recommend trying it out. It is very good for white. It usually scores pretty good for white. Since the Sicilian, generally speaking, scores pretty well for black. You definitely want to try it out, and again, if they do play that pawn to g6, that's going to be the huge mistake there. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video on the Magnus Smith trap. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.